if you're a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, you have children that you love. And one of the most built-in things in a adult human who has young humans they're trying to raise to be adult humans is to protect them, keep them safe. And the problem is that with mainstream media, we get so many messages of child molesters and terrible accidents and terrible things that can happen to children that we become almost paralyzed as parents. And when I say parents, I mean any adult in charge of a child, that we can't just let the child be a child and do the things that children need to do to grow up to be healthy, well-adjusted adults. And I've got a great guest today who's got an amazing book about just this very thing, and an amazing website and a society that she runs. And I want to bring her up and introduce her. This is Lenore Skenazy, and she is the most dangerous, most terrible parent in all of the United States. She has been titled this by multiple very large mainstream media outlets over decades now. Lenore, you've been terrible for a long time.
Right. I'm getting used to it.
I feel like you're recidivist. You're not going to change. I feel like that you really believe in this stuff. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you. I saw your interview recently with Dr. Brett Weinstein.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to that and I'm like, oh, yeah, we've got to have her in the community. So welcome. Tell everybody just a little bit about you and how you became the worst parent in America.
Not the worst parent, I'm worst mom. You could still wrest the dad title from me. So first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast, and thank you for liking fat. I've liked fat all my life, and it's fine to hear it finally vindicated. So
eat the fat, absolutely.
Like the good fat fight. Thank you. So me, I'm Lenore. I came to whatever prominence I have because when our younger son was 16. Oh, that's a number out of nowhere. When our younger son was 9, he started asking me and my husband if we would take him someplace he'd never been before and let him find his own way home by subway, because we live in New York City. And that's how we get around. And so one sunny Sunday, I did just that. I took him to fancy schmancy Bloomingdale's, where he'd never been, because who gives a kid clothes from Bloomingdale's? And I left him in the handbag department, which is right above a subway entrance. He took the subway home. He came in levitating with just pride and glee and that feeling of like, now, today I'm a man sort of thing. And I was a newspaper columnist at the New York Sun at the time. And so I wrote a column, Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the Subway Alone. And 2 days later, I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News and NPR. Everybody was doing it. Being described as this horrible parent who had let her son do something that maybe he would have survived. It's amazing that he did, but why would anyone do that? And I'm like, well, if I thought that he wasn't surviving, I wouldn't have done it. And so I started a blog and I called it Free Range Kids. And I said, I love safety. I love sane safety. I like seatbelts, and I like mouth guards. I like brakes. I like high beams. I like things that make sense. But I don't think a kid needs a security detail every time they leave the house. And that's how I got my nickname, America's Worst Mom. And yet that's how I found a lot of people who agree with us. I don't know if I should call you Ken or Dr. Barry.
Yeah, Ken is fine. Thank you.
Ken. Okay, Ken. I think you're having me on because you recognize that somehow we've jumped the shark. In fact, we think of sharks all the time. It's sort of the problem. You think of sharks when you're going in the ocean. You really don't have to, for the most part. And we're always thinking of these worst case scenarios when we are trying to decide whether we're going to let our kid, walk to school, wait at the bus stop, play at the park. And not to get too far ahead of myself, I'll just say that once I started Free Range Kids about 7 years ago, Jonthan Haidt, who just wrote The Anxious Generation, was talking to Dan Shuchman, who was chairman of a group that I think you'd love called FIRE, which fights for free speech on campus. It's all these heterodox people. And they were saying that kids on campus seemed a little fragile. And they were asking for things like trigger warnings and safe spaces as if as if they needed a space that was safe, because anything outside of that, they weren't safe. And so they were conflating feeling uncomfortable. Maybe somebody was coming to campus whose, ideas they didn't like, but they were uncomfortable, not unsafe. And so the two of them were puzzling about this, and they wanted to make sure that young people felt open-minded and curious and ready for the unknown and for some new ideas and to think for themselves. And they realized that if you're talking about this with college kids, that's a late stage intervention. And so John was saying to Dan, why don't we try to do, or maybe Dan was saying to John, I wasn't there. We should start younger. We should be trying to raise kids who are more resilient, open-minded, ready for the world, confident when they're young. So they get to campus and they see a speaker is coming who they disagree with, and they read up on them, and they go to the lecture and they raise their hand and they raise some objections, as opposed to, no, I can't hear them. That threatens me. And John was a fan of the book Free Range Kids, and we had met each other earlier than that. He said, well, let's start a nonprofit with Lenore dedicated to changing this culture of fear. And so they came to me and I said, okay, but we should bring in one more person as our co-founder, who's Peter Gray, who I'd also recommend. Maybe you know him already. Do you know him, Peter Gray?
I've watched some of his stuff.
Yeah, he's so great. So he's a professor at Boston College of Psychology, and he wrote one of those thick psychology textbooks that's in all the colleges across America. But more importantly, he spent his career studying the importance of something that I'll bet you grew up with, which is mixed age kids just playing without somebody organizing them and bringing the snacks and reminding them to hydrate and deciding whether the ball was in or out. And so the four of us founded Let Grow, like it says down there. And our goal is to make it easy and normal and also legal to raise kids with the kind of independence most of today's adults still remember, but will rapidly become something like carding wool, unless we get back on track.
And I think that you and I are uniquely positioned to have this conversation because you come from very urban New York City, and I am in the deepest, darkest hardwood jungle of Tennessee, very, very rural. And so there are particular fears that a parent from each of those situations would have. And so for my very rural listeners, the fact that you basically set your 9-year-old free in the urban jungle of New York City,
right.
That's like an added layer of anxiety that you just gave all those parents, right? And so then I'm going to tell some stories from very rural Tennessee, out in the woods, that anybody who lives in a city, maybe even you, Lenore, you'll be like, oh my God.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm terrified of the woods. Tell me more.
Right. Right. The first story I want to tell you is my son Becket. He's almost 5, but he was 4.5 when this happened. We were about a quarter mile up the highway checking on our sheep. And we have about 40 sheep that we rotate through pasture.
You know how to card wool. Can you just
repeat that again? Say that again.
If you have 40 sheep, you practically actually do know how to card wool.
We don't. We have hair sheep, not wool sheep, because that's too much trouble. So he loves to get out in the middle of the flock and play and try to touch the sheep. And of course, there's sheep poop everywhere, and there's sheep urine everywhere. And he's often barefoot when he's doing this. And for most city, let's say city mice and country mice, most city mice like you would be like, oh my God, this is terrible. So this one particular day, he's like, Dad, I want to walk home. And he's never said that before. He's 4.5. I'm like, well, I mean, we can almost see our house from that pasture. And so I'm like, okay, because I just read your book. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Do not get in the highway, stay in the grass, right? And so I'm going to follow you. And I was about 150 feet behind him. And so he's like, I don't want to ride with you. I want to walk. I'm like, okay. So I say, that's the direction, take off. And so he takes off, and he's shirtless and he's shoeless, walking by the side of the road here in rural Tennessee. And about 5 or 6 vehicles passed on his journey home. And he stayed well off the pavement. He listened to his instructions, and he ran part of the way. He walked part of the way. He'd get distracted by something in the ditch. He'd go over and check that out. And I was about 150 feet, 200 feet behind him in my Gator, which is like a off-road 4-wheel drive thing. About 5 cars almost came to a complete stop because here's this little boy walking beside the road with no shoes and no shirt in the bright sunlight. Oh my God, he's going to get skin cancer, right? And they would slow down and they would look, and I'm sure they were checking to see if he looked like he was in distress. And then they would see me behind him, and then they would be like, oh, that's Dr. Berry. And then they'd go about their business. And he made it all the way home. His mom, Nisha, almost had a heart attack when she saw him walking up the road. But then she saw me behind him. It's like, oh, okay, it's fine. How anxious does that make you as a city mouse that I let my son walk beside a highway unprotected for a quarter mile and just walk home? Am I the worst father in America? Or was I actually doing a good thing there?
Well, I think you know who you're pitching to. I think that's fantastic. And I think what's strange about it is if you imagine like 100 years earlier, or maybe even 50 years earlier, the idea of a country kid walking along the side of the road, having visited his sheep would have been just the most normal thing ever. And what's interesting to me, and I guess interesting to you because you have me here, is that in a generation or two, I guess it's 2 at this point, any trust that we've had in our kids, our community, our fellow human beings, our immune system, that we've lost all our trust in anything except ourselves hovering. And it's a real cultural shift. It's been terrible for kids. They're anxious and depressed. It's terrible, especially for moms who have zero free time. And apparently, more women than men don't even want to have kids today, because if you're spending 24 hours as a chaperone, a chauffeur, a cook, and a homework lasher, that doesn't seem like a real fun way to spend the next 18 years. And so I obviously applaud you. And you're going to hear me quote Peter Gray about 17 times in the next hour. But Peter Gray, it is, who explained to me that 4 is the age when kids can take in instructions and follow them. Not that you would trust them with the keys to the nuclear power plant, but you could trust them to walk a quarter mile in their neighborhood home, especially with you following behind. That doesn't seem to be anything crazy about that at all.
Now, we have a question from one of our tribe members. Is that okay if I bring the question up?
I guess so. Let's see.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's Rush. So who knows? Rush says you came to me through Nick Gillespie and the Reason Foundation. Yep. Since that time and the rise of social media, do you think the situation has improved or worsened?
Wow. Rush. Rush is his name?
Yep.
Okay. Rush. That's a question I could answer either way. And so I guess I'm just going to answer both, if that's okay. I'll say, first of all, I love Reason. Reason gave me such an enormous platform that has helped me so much. And I think they make so much sense. I think they have reason on their side. And Nick is fantastic. And by the way, he's getting married this weekend. So what's better is that people are aware that an overprotected childhood is not doing kids any favors. And I mean, I feel like every day somebody sends me an article from some prestigious publication that has just come to this same revelation. A week ago, the New York Times had an article that said, ignore your kids more. I'm like, I think that's good. And then the Atlantic had a piece this weekend from a headmaster that I just blogged about that was said, like, let's do less for our kids because we're taking out all these opportunities for them to prove themselves and to, solve problems and to feel confident. So I feel like the culture is recognizing that what I'm suggesting, and it's not just me, makes sense. That really we love coining phrases. And one of them is always helping kids isn't always helping them. It's just doing too much for them. On the other hand, we have, I don't want to talk about phones. Phones, I feel like everybody else is talking about phones, but I don't think they're talking about this one angle of phones. People are talking about kids on social media or kids on their phones all the time. I'm interested in the fact that when a kid has a phone and a parent can always be in touch with them, or they can always be in touch with a parent, that's changing the parent-child relationship in a way that I think is particularly harmful to the parents, because it's basically saying, look, you can see everything your kid is doing with these horrible gizmo watches. You can not only have the kid call you anytime, which they can do on a regular phone, but you could also listen in like a bugging device on whatever they're saying with their friends. So they have zero privacy. And you have this kind of omniscience that wasn't ever humanly possible, right? There was no omniscient person until very recently. And with this omniscience comes the idea that if anything bad happens, it's because you weren't paying enough attention, because you should have known exactly where they were and who they were with and what they were saying and what they were doing. And so it's driving parents crazy with fear. And the more it drives them crazy, the closer they feel they have to be. And the closer they are, the more they see that they should be taking, the more they feel like they must and can be watching. And also, there was a quote once from Wendy Mogul, who wrote The Blessings of a Skinned Knee, that I find really great, which is that the closer you look at something, the more you see its flaws, which is why sometimes you think your kid's friends are nicer than your own kids. It's like, wow, he's so polite. And look at my kid. So we're watching them so closely. We see, oh, he wasn't being nice, or he wasn't sharing, or he went the wrong direction, or I wouldn't have done that or said that. And so we jump in more. And so what I see getting worse is the idea that our kids are these little marionettes that we can, manipulate from near or far, any second of the minute, any second of the day. And I don't know how to change that, because the technology is here, and with it comes the idea of complete control, which is an illusion that's driving us crazy.
I totally agree. Now, it's always been my goal as a parent to raise children to become adults who are intelligent, well-adjusted, able to interact with other people, able to problem solve. That's kind of always been my goal has never been to be my child's best friends, or to protect my child from every single scraped knee and bruised elbow. There are many parents through the years who have looked at me like, what's wrong with you? Why would you let your kid do that? Now, what do you think about my goal for parenting? And let me ask you this question on the back end. Is being a helicopter parent, literally listening in on your child's phone and their watch and trying to protect them from every scraped knee, is this a form of soft child abuse? Unintentional, of course.
Unintentional.
Unmeant, but yet, but if the goal is to raise a well-adjusted, problem-solving, successful, happy adult, and you are literally taking the tools away from your child to achieve those goals, is that not a form of soft child abuse?
Well, child abuse is such a fraught and awful word, but I think you just answered your own question by saying taking away every opportunity for them to, fail, get hurt, solve a problem, do something on their own, leaving them with no tools to live their life. Isn't that a bad idea? I'd have to say that sounds like a terrible idea. I also want to take a step back and say parents are poor. I feel bad for parents that my kids are in their 20s, and I'm grateful that they're out of that, but then they'll have kids at some point. And what's so sad is that, like, even if you don't want to be a helicopter parent, even if you agree, Dr. Barry's right, I don't want to cripple them with kindness. There are so many ways that we're not even allowed to make a rational parenting decision. I mean, there are schools that will not let a kid get off the bus at the bus stop at the end of the day unless there's an adult there to walk them home. And sometimes it's 2 blocks and sometimes it's 2 houses, but it doesn't matter. There was, I can't remember, it was Kentucky, I think, where if a parent isn't there 3 times, 3 different times throughout the school year, the kid will be handed over to Child Protective Services. So even if you want the kid to walk, you can't. And then there are places that won't allow a child to self-dismiss. There are programs where you're supposed to stay and watch the entire soccer practice or dance class or whatever. And then you want your kid to be responsible for their own homework, but the parent has to sign it. And you want your kid to love reading, but you have to time them 20 minutes after school. They have to read for 20 minutes. And actually, I heard from one mom who said that her kid used to be a reader, loved reading. And then there was the 20-minute rule for the reading log. And at this point, he stops mid-sentence when that buzzer goes off, because it's become external to him. But so much of childhood has been sort of externalized to adults. You can't just play a game of soccer after school with your friends. That you have to go to a soccer league, and it's 4 days a week, and there's a game on the weekend, and there's the trophy, and it's just it's a culture that has demanded constant adult supervision and intervention, and that is driving kids crazy.
Yeah. And mentioning the CPS, which for viewers outside of the United States, that stands for Child Protective Services. Alyssa has a question. How do you navigate the community around you when you do trust your kids? I would love to be able to send my kids to the playground down the street, but I'm worried other neighbors will call Child Protective Services. How do you navigate that?
Right. There's three answers. The first one is, I'm just going to tell you what Let Grow does, because that will answer part of this. So when we started Let Grow, I didn't want to be a thought leader anymore, because people would always nod along. Oh, that makes so much sense. Yes, children need independence. Yes, I loved my childhood. And then they'd go home and nothing would change. And so Let Grow came up with two programs. I have to cough one sec. That are designed to sort of change the entire community. And one of them is the Let Grow experience. It's free. It's a program for schools. It's not even a program. It's just this thing you download. And it's a homework assignment that the teacher gives the kid. And it says, go home and do something new on your own with your parents' permission, but without your parents. And the reason this is so significant is because all the kids in the grade or the school or the district are doing it. Which means that they're all talking to their parents about, like, well, can I go get ice cream? I want to follow the sheep. I want to go climb a tree, whatever. And then they all start doing it. And when you have kids zooming around the neighborhood, sorry, now I'm eating my hair. It's a terrible interview. I'm so sorry. But when you have these kids doing things again, you've re-normalized the idea of kids outside. We heard from one principal at a school that was doing this, that a kid had gone to the grocery, a small grocery, and the clerks there were like, why is there a kid here without a parent? And one of the clerks had asked the kid, and he said, well, I'm doing my Let Grow experience. Well, what is that? And I have to go do something by myself. And they're okay. But then as more kids came in, it re-normalized it. So I'd say John Haidt always says, the solution to a collective problem, like how do we get our kids back aside, is a collective solution, which is have all the kids doing things and have the school recommending it. So that just re-normalizes kids outside. Two other answers. One is, if your school isn't doing it for one reason or another, you can't get buy-in, then you try to get a couple of other friends in the neighborhood who think this is a good idea. And you have a little play club in front of your house, or you send all the kids to the grocery together, or you keep Friday afternoons free for free play. And maybe you sit on the stoop and everybody knows that you're going to be out there. So everybody knows is another thing. You can put notes in people's mailboxes. You can go on Nextdoor and say, Friday afternoons, I'm going to be outside if anybody wants to send their kids out. Just something to reassure the other neighbors that this is normal, that they can join you, that it's just a great idea. And then the last thing that Let Grow is doing on this front is that we've passed laws in 8 states so far that we call the Reasonable Childhood Independence Laws. And they simply state, states' neglect laws are pretty open-ended. Most of them, they say, like, parents have to provide proper supervision. And they don't, like, what's proper supervision? I think that letting your 4.5-year-old walk, home is proper. And there are people who think I'm crazy for letting my 9-year-old take the subway. So the law, the Reasonable Childhood Independence Law, just says, it defines, it sort of clarifies that neglect is when you put your kid in obvious and serious danger, not anytime you take your eyes off them. And that helps the free-range parents, the Let Grow parents like me and you, and it helps parents living in poverty who are working, single mom's working 2 jobs, and she knows her kid's going to be okay with a latchkey. That's not neglect. That's knowing that my kid is going to be okay, and I don't have to pay for a babysitter from 4 to 6 every afternoon. So it's gotten buy-in from the left and the right. And in general, we've had a Democrat and a Republican sponsor the bill. And in 5 of the 8 states where it passed, which are Utah, Texas, sorry, I'm so slow, Colorado, Virginia, Oklahoma, Connecticut, Illinois, and Montana, there you go. In 5 of those states, it passed unanimously. And we're still trying to get it passed in the other states. So if you go to letgrow.org and you click on the thing that says state laws, there's a way to get involved and try to get your state to pass one.
Nice. And I would love to get that passed in Tennessee. So I will be checking out the website, and I'll help in any way I can. Another thing you talk about that I didn't, it never occurred to me that it was as important as it is, is mixed age.
Oh, you just froze.
Age play, being able to play together without adult oversight. And so let me tell you about Becket and Bonnie, and then I want you to take this and run with it. So Beckett's 4.5, almost 5. Bonnie's 2.
Oh, wow.
And they love to play with each other. They love to play together, but very often Becket, in my estimation, or his mom's estimation, he's too rough. He's too overbearing. He tends to try to lead the play, and this upsets Bonnie. Should we intervene? Should we interfere with that? Should we set more rules for that mixed age play? Should we scold Becket when he takes a toy, but just because he's physically bigger? Or should we allow that stuff to happen and then apply that to larger, like school events, church events, community events where there's mixed age children playing together? How involved should the parents be?
I'm going to go directly to the larger events because I don't know when it comes to 2 kids and one's a 2-year-old and one's a boy and a girl and bigger and smaller and bickering in front of you. I have no idea. I have to admit that I'm not, excuse me, I'm not a parenting expert. I'm certainly not a discipline expert. I totally blew it on the chores front. My kids did no chores. So I'm not a parenting person. I am a sort of, I don't know what I am, but I'm America's Worst Mom. There you go. But I can tell you that larger groups of mixed age kids are how humans grew up from when we came down from the trees and lost our tails until now, until like 23 minutes ago. Everybody who was growing up was playing in a mixed age group, whether it's the Peanuts gang or, some kids in the savannas of Africa. It was always a group of the littlest kids who could toddled after the bigger kids. And inevitably, there was a lot of dissension. It's like, let's do this. No, that's not fair. I'm going to make the teams. Those teams aren't fair. We're always doing this. We don't want to listen to. And there was also empathy. One of the things Peter Gray points out is that we've really stratified our culture. We allow for segregation by age. If you're a 7-year-old, you are going to be playing baseball, soccer, and football only with other 7-year-olds, maybe 7 and 8-year-olds. Imagine that. What a scope. And so in a group like that, when it's just kids your exact age, all you can tell is who's the fastest, who can hit the ball the farthest, who's the strongest. But when you have, just this spectrum of ages, so many different things start happening. And one of them is a 12-year-old is pitching, and up comes the 5-year-old, up comes Becket, barely holding his bat, right? There is no glory to the 12-year-old in striking out Becket. Ha ha, you missed 3 times in a row to the back of the line. So what you often see, what happens spontaneously, and this is why Mother Nature programmed kids to want to play, is that they'll throw it gently. And then Becket goes, thunk. And the pitcher goes, whoa, it's a home run. Look at Becket. I wonder if he can, oh my God, I can't get to the ball fast enough. He's rounding second base. And Becket is so gleeful. And in that, you have so many different things going on. You have the 12-year-old has empathy. I mean, we've found that kids who participate in free play like this, they like playing with the younger kids. They like teaching them things. They like chasing them so that the kids aren't bored and don't feel lonely. And what they don't realize is, I like being an adult. I like empathy. I like really stepping into this role of a leader. And why do older kids even tolerate playing with younger kids? Because there's something to be gained from it. And there's also the fun of little kids are goofy. And what if they start going, they're putting the bat on their heads, and then it just, there's not tension. It's not a trophy. It's not a league game. It's just fun. And then if it's not fun, you change the rules. And I say, let's play with 2 balls. And you say, let's play with our ears or whatever it is. And so we compromise and we come up with things, and we're creative, right? And I have to communicate my new idea for a rule. And Peter, I told you I'd mentioned Peter a million times. Peter points out that if you have a group of 7-year-olds trying to play cards, it does not work. It's just a disaster. But if you have 7-year-olds playing with 9-year-olds, the 9-year-olds are not saying like, here is how we're going to play the game of rummy. They're saying like, hold up your cards. We can see everything on your cards. Hold them up. And don't put down your queen. That's so stupid. You have to hold on to your queen. But they are learning how to give a lesson. They are learning how to communicate. They've internalized the rules enough so that they can explain it. And the 7-year-olds don't want to look like babies. They get to play with the 9-year-olds, right? So they sit up a little straighter and they hold up their cards and they learn how to play the game. And thus it has always been. And the other thing about mixed age play, there was a lady in New York that was a perfect New York Post story. Nobody will know it. The New York Post is just a tabloid that just lives for craziness. And one of the there was a mom a couple of years ago who made the papers because she was suing her kids' preschool because her daughter was 4 and she was in a class with a lot of 2-year-olds. And she literally wrote, like, how is my kid going to get into Harvard? Literally name checked Harvard, if she's stuck with these kids who are 2 years old. And I'm thinking, like, that's how your kid gets in. She rules over them for an entire year. She has minions doing her bidding and she learns to be like this complete bossy pants. And then she goes on and she gets into Harvard. But anyways, the point is that when you are in a mixed age group, eventually you are the oldest and you do get to lead. Whereas if you're just with kids your age, you only lead if you're the strongest or the fastest or the most manipulative. So everybody's getting something out of this. Mother Nature put the drive to play into kids so that they would learn all the lessons on the way to having fun, all the messiness. And the reason it is we have to give kids some time to do this without us there is because when we're there, we are better at getting to the meat of it. Like, oh my God, they're wasting their time. You guys, I'll make the teams. Count off by 2s. You go here. I'll decide when we start. Okay, the game is beginning. And we think that we've optimized that experience because nobody is dithering. No kids are like sitting there pulling the grass out of the ground, waiting for something to happen. But we've actually taken all the nutrients out. And I think this is where you and I very much overlap because the nutrition is the part that doesn't seem nutritious. It seems like the waste. And it turns out that we got it completely backwards. And the game is what happens when all the growth is over, right? It's the reward. It's the cherry on top. And the growth is in the whole wheat, the unsaturated fats, whatever is in the negotiating, the creating, the making something happen, not in it happening.
So there's almost benefit. There is benefit in the bickering, in the arguing, in the what any parent sitting around it would look like a complete and utter waste of time. Like, you guys are here to play baseball. You're not here to argue all day. But you're saying that during the argument and the bickering, that's when the learning is happening.
Well, you tell me. I mean, I think we both agree. But what is happening? Like, I say, I want to play Barbies and you want to play baseball. Now what?
Right. And so we would either just agree to disagree and you would go play with Barbie and I would go play with football, or we would agree to compromise and maybe play a game of Barbie football.
Exactly.
Or we would just swap and I would play with your Barbie and you would play with my football. But you're saying that regardless of the outcome, what game wound up being played,
right?
We're learning to compromise. We're learning to debate. We're learning to rationally defend our position. We're learning to be able to say, oh, no, you're right. That would be more fun to do it that way. Or we're also learning that there are ramifications. If I just take my football and go home,
no one to play with.
There's ramifications with that. And I learned that. And that actually happened to me in school when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah.
People were doing stuff I didn't like. So I just took my football and went over and sat in the corner of the playground for about 2 minutes. And I was like, well, this is boring. Maybe I'll let them do what they want to do because that was more fun. And so we went back to playing the game. I
just have to ask you, when did you remember this? Just now, or have you thought about it many times?
No, it just came to me just now, but I've thought of that several times. A very, very big problem for many parents, letting their child walk by the side of the road in rural Tennessee or letting their child take the subway home in New York City, is stranger danger. Stranger danger. There are perverts, there are pedophiles, there are people who will harm our children. We see news stories on the news every day. There's articles in parenting magazines every day.
Yeah.
What is a parent who wants their child to be this free range kid?
Mm-hmm.
How do we cope with almost the programmed anxiety? It's been programmed into your head. If you watch mainstream media at all, how would you start to tease that out if you were a parent with this anxiety? Somebody's going to kidnap my kid if I let them do these things.
Right.
Where do you begin?
I begin from two different directions, and I'll give you the one that doesn't work, and then I'll give you the one that does. The one that doesn't work is I have amazing statistics. If you go to Let Grow and you look at the bottom, you go to crime stats, you'll see that the crime rate today is what it was in the late 70s. It went up and up in the 80s, peaked around 93, has been coming down, went up a little during COVID, and then went back down again. We're at a 50-year crime low. Who cares? Nobody believes me. It makes no impression. What if your kid is the one, is what everybody always says. And I say, people say that they don't want their kid to be a statistic. I'm like, yes, you do, because it's like 1.5 million to 1. So most of the statistics are here. Doesn't matter. The only thing that I've seen that helps parents breathe again and not feel so terrified is letting them go and do something on their own once. And that's why the Let Grow experience pushes that to happen, because it won't happen. Because when it's in your head, it's like, well, if I let him go, I'd feel so bad if something happened, so I won't let him go. But I should let him go, but I can't, because if something happened, nothing changes. Only action breaks the cycle. And so letting your kid walk that quarter mile, letting your kid climb the tree, letting your kid go to the store while you stay home, especially if you're not tracking them, will rewire you. The only thing that rewires parents is the thrill of actually seeing that their kid could do something independently. Generally, when I ask people, like, what was their proudest moment with a kid, it's when their kid did something without them. And they realize, like, oh, my kid is capable or competent, or boy, he screwed up, but it was still okay. Anxiety is the fear that something bad is going to happen, that if it happens, you won't be able to cope. And once you can't cope, all bets are off. And so the only thing that breaks anxiety is exposure, right? That's exposure therapy. You need to be exposed to the thing you're afraid of, and then it takes away its power. Always shrinking from it, avoiding whatever scares you the most, only gives it more power. And so the only thing that I can say to a parent who's afraid of stranger danger and kidnapping, and I don't blame you, because I do feel like we are breathing in the air of fear every day. We live in a culture that's just obsessed with worst case scenarios. The only thing that fights fear is reality, and reality can't be in your brain. Reality has to be real. So I know I sound like a broken record, which is an old thing that used to go in a circle and they sometimes got broken. But Let Grow has these two things that are free that schools can do. That is a collective problem. I didn't tell you a collective solution to a collective problem. The other thing that I recommend that schools do is the Let Grow Play Club, which is to just keep the school open for mixed age, no devices, free play before or after school. There's an adult there crouching in the corner, looking at their phone, whatever. They're not organizing the games. They're not solving the arguments. They're not running over when somebody falls. They're there like a lifeguard. If there's something terrible, they are there. But otherwise, the kids are playing. It's like a wildlife preserve for childhood, where a couple hours a day, kids can be kids.
I love it. And so let's say we're talking to a helicopter mom who just is the mother bear. She doesn't let her child do anything alone ever. What if she was at the mall and her son or daughter said, I want to go in that store. This would be a great opportunity for the mom to say, okay, I'm going to let you go in there by yourself. I'll be out here in the hall watching the exit, and you come out when you're ready. So instead of teaching children stranger danger, don't ever talk to a stranger, what would be some better rules that a parent could teach their child and say, hey, instead of saying that, here's the rules. Like when Becket was walking down the highway, here are the rules. Right. What are some rules that a parent could give to a young child instead of don't talk to strangers?
Right. First of all, you want kids to know that they can talk to, I always say you can talk to anyone, you can't go off with anyone, because the worst case scenario of you're being followed by a van. There's a man in there dressed like a clown. You want to be able to run across the street and, go into the store and say, I'm going to wait here until the van passes, or can I use your phone? You just want to be able to talk to people, right? So first of all, stranger danger is just bad advice to begin with. And another reason it's such bad advice is that the vast majority of crimes against children, horrible things, are committed by people they know. And so fearing strangers is looking in the wrong direction. So the advice that I give, and it's not my advice, somebody else came up with it, and it's in a lot of literature talking about child safety, is to teach your kids the 3 R's. And those are: recognize that no one can touch you where your bathing suit covers. They just can't. Resist. Second R is resist. If somebody bothers you, I don't care if they're an adult, run, kick, scream, hit them in the balls. You're allowed to resist as much as you want and more. Just resist them, run away, right? Don't be the low-hanging fruit. And then finally, report. And report is really key. It's the idea is report to me. If somebody has been bothering you and telling you have to keep a secret, if you don't, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt your family. Tell me these things because I can take care of you and nothing bad will happen to you. I won't even be mad at you. So you're taking away the shame from the kid, and you're taking away the secrecy from this nefarious person, whether it's a stranger or a family member or something in between. And those 3 R's, recognize, resist, and report, are going to keep your kid way safer than this stranger danger thing that just became a phrase in the 80s. And it really was based on nothing. I mean, my other statistic that I tell people is that if you wanted your kid to be kidnapped by a stranger in like a Law and Order type kidnapping, you probably know this, but do you know how much time you'd have to keep them outside unsupervised for this to be statistically likely to happen?
Probably days on end.
More. It's at 750,000.
Would be my guess.
It's 750,000 years.
750,000 years you'd have to let your kid play outside before statistically they would probably get abducted. Right. And so that's a compelling number. Yeah. Surely that will ease parents' minds. But I find the same thing talking about health, medicine, and nutrition as you do. Facts don't ever help. You got to help parents have a way of thinking about something. You have to tell a story.
Not thinking, experiencing it for themselves.
Yes. Facts and statistics never help. You mentioned in one of your interviews about the earliest Sesame Street videos back in 1969, 1970, because another fear that parents have is if they let their children stray too far, that they're going to get a skull fracture or break their neck or jab their eyes out. Something devastatingly horrible is going to happen. And I actually looked these videos up. You can find them online of Sesame Street, the kids playing in basically an urban playground jungle situation, playing with pipes and machinery and ladders. And tell us what warning Sesame Street had to put on that when they re-released it and what the hell's going on there.
Well, the warning that appears at the beginning of this compilation of old school Sesame Street videos says, it's not exactly these words, but the following is intended for adult viewing only and may not be suitable for our younger or youngest viewers, which is weird because that's who they were created for, right? Sesame Street was not meant for, 29-year-old slackers, or 43-year-old moms. It was made for young kids to be learning about the world. It was made to present a sunny day. Everything's A-okay, even though the kids are out and they're playing in the vacant lot and they're talking to strangers and they aren't even wearing helmets when they're on their tricycles. And what's disturbing about the warning is that Sesame Street itself cannot endorse what it knows. It didn't just throw up, family videos and call it Sesame Street and hope for the best. These were created. The whole idea of Sesame Street was created because they wanted to model a wonderful childhood filled with fun and friendship and curiosity and adventure and competence and growing kids growing up and learning about the world and learning about their letters and sometimes their numbers too, and which one of these things is not like the others. And if if our country had descended into World War III, if going outside really was the zombie apocalypse, okay, don't go outside, right? The following is intended for before the zombie apocalypse. Now that there's a zombie apocalypse, don't send your kids outside, but it's not the zombie apocalypse. And so instead, we're warning people against appreciating the world, letting their kids be part of it, and letting their kids experience some of it without always being in the passenger seat of their lives. We're talking about what's the best thing for kids. And I literally don't know. And I told you, I have no idea how to discipline your kids. Good luck. We can check in a few years. But I do know that when you feel like you're alive and things are, you can make things happen, and you're curious, and you can follow your curiosity, and you can change your mind. You can sit in the corner with your football and then come back in. You can make a decision on the spot. I am going to let my kid walk home. That's a feeling of what's called the internal locus of control. I'm in control. I have a say over my life. And you feel good. You feel it's the opposite of anxiety, because you can handle things. And if you can't, it won't be the end of the world. But an external locus of control is when you feel like other people are in control of your lives. Obviously, the worst example, the most onerous, would be if you're a prisoner, right? You don't decide what you eat, who you live with, where you live, what you do, how you spend a second of your day. Yeah. But a lot of kids' lives is prescribed by an adult. It's sort of like being micromanaged all day long. And when you have an external locus of control, it is depressing. You don't have any agency. It's anxiety producing because you're not in charge. You might screw up. Somebody's always watching, always helping, always suggesting. And you don't feel, and you feel passive. And I feel like we always talk about anxiety and depression with kids now, but what I've seen is this weird passivity of, and I heard about this from several teachers, which I used to think was an urban myth, but they told this to me in different parts of the country, is that like nowadays when a kid in a classroom and their pen drops, they look at it. One teacher says, as if it's magically going to come up, because they're so used to not doing things that, like, am I allowed to pick up the pen? Is this going to be embarrassing? Am I going to screw up? Am I going to mess up? And so if you're in sort of the passenger seat of your life the whole time, because somebody who loves you is helping you all the time and doing things for you, it's not great. And last Peter Gray reference, I promise, but he did publish an article in the Journal of Pediatrics 1 year ago this month that chronicled how, as children's independence and free play and real world responsibilities have gone down, their anxiety and depression have gone up. And he says it's not just correlation, it's causation. And the cause is their internal locus of control has become external. They have the exoskeleton of a child and they're running to their game, but somebody else is always telling them what to do.
Yeah. And I think just as a parent, I would think that child is waiting for someone to pick the pencil up for them. That's what they're waiting for. I don't think they think it's magically going to come back. They think somebody needs to get that for me. And I'm 55. I'm not going to ask your age, but I think we both came from a generation where the locus of control was much more internalized. If you want your pencil picked up, you pick up the damn thing yourself.
What would I do?
If you want your breakfast made, you go make your breakfast. Right. We were taught that in our generation. And I think there's several generations beneath us who are younger than us, who it's very obvious when you talk to them that they think that the locus of control not only is external, but should be external. They feel like they should be told what to do, that their pencil should be picked up for them, that they should be told when to do this and how to do this. And that's very frustrating for folks in their 50s, 60s and older, because that's not the world we grew up in. As my grandfather used to say, it was root hog or die. Like there was nobody coming to help you. You had to figure this out on your oon.
Wait, I have to pause. Since I'm not from Tennessee, what does that mean?
So it's just a phrase that means you've got to do it yourself. And so pigs, they root. That's how they find food, is they'll root and dig up the ground, and then they find tubers and grub worms and other stuff. And so if a pig won't root, it's going to die. And so the term
Oh, okay.
root hog or
Oh, so
die,
it's actually sort of talking to the hog.
it's talking to the hog, root hog or
Uh-huh.
die. You got to do that. And that's very applicable to all times in human history, including now. But I think the locus of control, most people in their, let's say the average person in their 20s, 30s, they feel like the locus is not in here. It's out there somewhere. Someone's going to fix this for me. Someone will fix this problem at the community level or even my neighborhood level. Somebody's in charge of fixing that. And it never occurs to them, I should fix this, or I should at least be part of the fix for this problem. That's a direct consequence of being raised their entire childhood that the locus of control is external. It's not in me. I'm not in charge of that. I have no responsibility here. It's
Right.
somebody else's job. It's mom's job, dad's job. It's whoever's job, the teacher, the daycare sitter. That this kind of stuff, this is why I think it's so important, is it ripples through society for generations. And I think we're starting to see problems with that at the state and national level, because there are so many people who don't have an internal locus of control.
Mm-hmm. Is that somebody telling you what to do? I hear a buzz.
I have no idea what that is. I hope
That's
it's
the
not a
alien
bomb.
invasion. Okay, there we go. Don't send your kids outside.
Mitch is
Alien
going to check.
danger.
It's here. I don't know what it is.
Okay, I'm happy it's not me.
If you see an explosion, then that's
Right, and you don't have a pager, right?
no.
Okay.
Yeah, that gets remote control. There you go.
Okay, there you go. Fine. What can I say? I agree. I mean, I always think there's hope, and it's never too late to, rest that internal locus of control. And, all it takes is doing something, and then you realize, like, oh my gosh, that's much easier than I thought. I want to start a bowling league. I'm going to call 5 friends. Okay, and now we have a bowling league. So it's never too late. But of course, the reason Let Grow exists is because we think if we start out reverse engineering the problems that have created passivity or this anxiety in kids, so much the better. It doesn't cost anything. It's just give kids back some independence, some free play, some responsibility. Kids like helping. They don't like being just takers. You got a 2-year-old, that's like the prime age to start. I didn't, but I hear it's very good.
Yes.
Separate the laundry. I still don't separate the laundry. But anyways, doing little things like that, certainly putting the napkins on the table, something like that, being part of a team. I mean, so just take a step back and look cynically at a culture that is trying to scare you every step of the way into wresting your child's childhood from them and say, is that really dangerous? Or did I just see a Law and Order episode? Is that, do I really have to walk my kid home if he's old enough? Can I tell the school I want to not be at the bus stop? That just doesn't make sense. My kid is walking 3 houses down. She's 7. I can't treat her like a 3-year-old. You just have to recalibrate what we're expected to do with and for our kids and think about whether it makes sense or whether we are actually eviscerating their childhoods and there's a way to bring it back.
Yes. This interview is going to be watched by thousands of people. It's probably going to be watched by a few parents who are clingers and latchers and helicopters. And do you have some simple steps? They've watched this video and they're like, holy crap, they're talking about me. I'm the parent always trying to get in amongst the mixed age kids and say, stop this bickering, and here, I'll just give you the rules. Right. That's me. Oh my God, I'm part of the problem. What's some simple beginning little baby steps that they could start to take with their thought process, their kids, etc., to not be that parent anymore?
Okay, first one sort of overarching thing and then some little nitty-gritty things you can do. But the overarching thing is like me too. When I'm with my kids and now they're in their 20s and I see them crossing the street and they have a phone, I'm like, put down your phone. Are you kidding? You're going to get, run over. And they're in their 20s and they cross the street all the time when I'm not with them. I'm a state away from one of them. Somehow he seems to be getting to and from work. So part of the problem is that when they're with you, they just outsource all their responsibility to you. You'll take care of it, right? And also, when you're with them, you worry. So part of it, like, this is going to sound very radical, but here's an idea. Don't always be with them. When you're with your kids, you'll see they're being mean. They're using their outdoor voice indoors. They're not sharing. They're doing something slowly that if they, my God, if you don't put that thing on the bottom, the whole tower is going to fall. So you're always going to want to intervene. It's just natural. So the only thing we can do is not always be with them, because when you're not always with them, then you're not always being driven crazy by them not being smart enough, nice enough, efficient enough. Okay. So that's A. Simple things to do. Of course, go to Let Grow and try to get your school to do the Let Grow experience, which will push you to let go. That's New York. I don't know if you can hear sirens behind us. The hospital, the Elmhurst Hospital, that was like the epicenter of COVID, down the block. So there you go. Anyways, so try to get your school to do these things, because of course there is strength in numbers. But if you can't, or if you're not ready to do that, find a friend who is willing to sit with you in the kitchen with your cup of coffee while you send your kids out with a watch, normal watch, not a gizmo watch, and you can't come in until the big hand is on the 12, right? And then at first they'll be like, but I want a cup of water, or this is boring, or can you come out and play, or can you bring out something, or can I get back on my iPad? But if they're out there for a long enough time, like I'd say half an hour to an hour, it gets boring enough that they find something interesting, whether it's the tree or the grass or the ball or the chalk. And then if you want to have fun, you go to a cafe with this same friend, and then you send your kids to the end of the strip mall or to the other end of the regular mall and say, I need you to buy me some unsaturated fats. Here, go get me that.
Get some butter.
Yeah, right. Get some butter, really yum, and some whipped cream while you're at it. And then they come back. They'll have had a little adventure, and they'll have had a hard time finding it because they've never been to the store by themselves before. And then it just re-normalizes the idea that you can take your eyes off your kids. It's fun for them because they're with another kid. There's the courage that you get from, we're doing this together. I think that, I'm stuck at home with my computer all day. Find somebody else who's doing that, and come, bring your laptop over to their house and send the kids into the backyard. I mean, there's no reason you have to spend all your time entertaining and watching over your kid. And it keeps getting easier because you keep getting this reality check of like, oh, my kid was fine. Oh, my kid is happy. Oh, my kid is sweaty and excited, because she just ran back saying, oh my God, we found this cream, or we found the butter and the milk and the bread. So not the bread. So just do it and then write me a note, because I love these little letters that say, I was so scared and I did it, and now I'm so proud, and now my kid is going to the park alone, and she insists on making us breakfast every Sunday.
Lenore Skenazy, thank you so much for sitting down to do this interview. Where can people find you? Tell us the websites, and I will put it in the show notes.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think you can see it says Let Grow. So if you go to letgrow.org, that's our main site. If you click on schools, there's the programs for the schools. Parents, it's the same stuff. It's just for the parents. Laws, it tells you about passing our laws. And also we teamed up with the professor of psychology named Camilo Ortiz, who studied whether independence works as therapy for kids with a diagnosis of anxiety. And there was a tiny pilot study for kids, but they were really anxious. I mean, like, they had like racing hearts, and they were not going to school. They were just too scared to live their lives. And 4 out of 4, once they started doing more things independently that they wanted to do, not things that they were forced to do or that they were afraid to do, just stuff that they wanted to do, like sell bracelets at school or take the Long Island Railroad or whatever. They went from feeling worried most of the time to feeling worried some of the time. Oh, no, a little bit of the time. And so if you're a therapist or a school counselor, you click on the manual, and there's a free manual on how to do independence therapy, which is basically just sending kids out to do things on their own. So it's all there. And I'm Lenore at letgrow.org. You can drop me a letter, drop me a story. Pictures good too, with all the rights to run them. And that's it. I just want to hear from you, and I want this to spread. All our materials are free. And I'm really grateful for your gigantic platform of, sort of iconoclastic thinkers that I got to talk to them today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. Feel free to share this video if you know a helicopter parent. because I promise you, they're not having fun either. They're miserable, just like their kid is miserable. You can help everybody feel better and happier by letting go just a little bit. Thank you, Lenore. See you later.
Thank you, Dr. B.